is Justin Ringlein, and I'm here to talk to you about painting some golden banner. So today we're going to be going through painting one of these assets, as we're liking to call them. Yeah, if you can pan up a little bit, these are all the different variations that you may get in your kit. And by no further descriptions, let's get to it. Alright, to start our painting of our golden banner, I'm going to carefully mix a outline color. So I'm going to pull some of my mid-tone green off and add a little bit of the dark to it, the deep or hunter's green. So for this flower, I'm going to just do the exterior or perimeter, or for drawing aficionados, contour, which means just the outside lines to begin with, and then where we have the outlines for the venation and the interior, I'm going to do with a different color. So I'm going to begin down towards my base and attempt to be doing the more, if you have a little water in your brush, it'll be a little more fluid to paint, not just with your wrist but with kind of your hand or your whole arm, to drag up and around.
So one question at this point you might be having is, how do I tell the difference between what the green parts are, the sepals, what the petals are, what's petal, what's venation? There's just a heck of a lot of lines here. What's going on? If you start from where all the pieces come together at the very, very base, that first whirl of shapes, those are your sepals. So those are going to be in green, outline them in green. From there, you have, similar to lupin, the petals. And they're arranged similar to lupin in that there's a banner petal at the top, and there are keel and wing petals down below. The two on top form the banner. Then to the outside of those, so the petal nearest you, that's going to be a wing petal. And there's going to be another layer behind that, that's the keel petal. So all of those are getting a dark outline, but these weird, funny, disconnected lines in the middle, that is venation. So those are going to get done in a different color. All right, so I've gotten to the stage where I need to fill in my venation in the sienna color. And you can actually do this in sienna or in green, and I'm going to mix the two because I can't make up my mind.
Yeah, well, definitely will help to clear off your brush a bit and go right into the raw sienna that we provided. And this will just give you, we may brush over these a bit, but this will kind of give you an indication of where these lines are.
As always, if you're having trouble with your paint not going far enough, or if it's not coming off of your brush very easily, add a bit of water to it, mix it in, thin your paint out with water. Especially for parts like this where we're kind of drawing with the paint, very important that it's pretty fluid.
So I'm going to go to our mid-tone green, and we're going to be filling in this protective layer. I'm using some water to thin it out a little bit, and then I'm going to go into our light green, do a little highlight, and also it'll show some blending. So as you can see, I'm blending into the wet mid-tone that I have created. That gives you some nice variation.
I'm doing a variation on what Justin's doing. I've painted in my mass tone, the main green color that I want, and then for my highlights, I'm going to add them not everywhere, but just in areas that I want to draw attention to. So I'm going to add a little bit right at the ends, right at the points, to draw some attention there. And I'm working quickly so that I can add wet paint to wet paint so that those color transitions are pretty smooth. And then the other area, oh, you know what? I've got this funny little bract down here at the bottom. I'm actually going to add a highlight to that too, just so that it doesn't get lost. Visually lost, I mean.
And subsequently, I'm working on lowlights, so shading. So I've been doing it similarly. I've added some highlights to the top ends. And I'm going back in where we've done our outline and adding some dark green again. And still it's wet, so it kind of blends a bit and gives us into that nice tone in here.
Highlights and lowlights should not be placed adjacent to one another unless you're describing a very sharp corner. So make sure you have some of what I described as the mass tone in between the two of them.
I'm fairly happy with what's going on down there. As I'm cleaning off my brush, what I'm going to do to show is this. I'm going to put a wash of just water up starting under my petals there. It'll thin out my paint quite a bit, but it'll kind of give me these nice tones. That's going to be a kind of a shadow, so I'm going to add a little bit of green to that. Now I'll be going into our banner petal to begin with. I'm going to start with cad yellow.
So my approach has been to take my coolest yellow, the more lemony yellow here, my cadmium yellow light, the one that's closest to green. I've blended it with white to increase the opacity and also increase the lightness of it. And I am filling in this instance, one of the wing petals, the whole dealio. And I'm having to remix my color as I go. And that's fine, because variations in how dark or light this is just going to add to how dynamic it appears to the viewer. So I'm pretty okay with that. And as I go, keep mixing, mixing, mixing. When I get into the areas that are lower down on the picture, high on the picture, low on the picture, banner petals are at the top, wing and keel petals are at the bottom. Any space that's near the bottom edge of each of those pieces is going to be both darker and other colors are going to be introduced. In this particular instance, I'm going to introduce a little bit of the cad yellow medium to this area. So I'm treating the areas that are catching light with my cool yellow, and then the areas that are catching shadow with a darker yellow. And then down here at the bottom, I'm even going to add a little bit of sienna.
Alright, so I've added the cad yellow for the warmer, bright tones up to kind of the mid-tone of the petals, and I'm going back in with the light cad that has a little bit of white into it and blending back into that color. Requires quite a bit of back and forth between water and paint a bit. So I'm going to take some white around the Venation. Again, the Venation we painted into sienna or green. Just kind of adding in a little bit of highlight. So I will eventually be taking in that cooler yellow up top and then bringing white up into that.
Working in the petals, it becomes more important to keep your brush clean. I've just made something of an error because while my paint is wet, I've added a green that's a little too dark over an area that's got a little bit too much sienna in it. And so it's starting to look a little bit dirty. I'm going to wait for this to dry a little bit, and then I'm going to cover that area up with more yellow.
I'm painting some thin washes of yellow over where I had painted in that green. So that's dry now, and then you can see the effect that you're getting there. It's kind of watercolor-ish, but it kind of gives you nice transparent layers.
The real secret to blending is that to do it, your paint needs to be wet.
Yes.
There's two ways to go about getting your paint wet. You can use water to thin your paint down and use successive glazes, or you can just pile the paint on. Both will get you a pretty solid blend if you work your paint wet into wet. So I'm ready to go in and start fixing my lines up. There are some areas where I've gone over the spots where my veins were initially painted in. They were initially painted in sort of a warm greenish brown color. That is almost nowhere in evidence. Each and every one of them is multiple colors because I've just gone over them in multiple colors as I've painted. I quite like this effect, and so rather than going back and fixing them, I'm going to leave them as they are for the Venation. However, there are some little details that I covered up. On the throat of the flower, we have these little spots for attracting pollinators, and I've covered a number of them up. In the actual flowers, these spots are quite a warm color, so I'm going to use my sienna to paint them back in. Good enough. Well, no, I'll add a little more.
Do the same. Just give
Now it's good.
effect.
And then in other areas, I want to fix up and clean up my contour line, the line around the edge. So I'm going to return once again to my deep green, that darkest green. And just in the areas where it's getting a little fuzzy, I'm going to touch it back up. The line doesn't have to be the same width the whole way around. This is a very dark color compared to the color of the petals. And so I'm going to try to keep my line fairly light. And I may not even go back over all the areas. You can leave some areas just a little fuzzy.
And I was going in and doing some little bit of minor touch-ups and kind of accent lines a bit, but I think we're looking pretty good.
Oh, one other fun thing that you can do. Again, pro move, don't have to do this, but it looks really fun. Take a little bit of white, mix it with your light green. Get a nice
I know where you're headed
light
with
green
this.
color with this. So in the areas where your highlights are, on the sepals, you can go back in,
Do a little fuzz.
add a little bit of fuzz. Use your tiniest brush.
That's a good point. Okay.
Again, like these hairs are not going to go everywhere. The effect of it being silvery is that they're only silvery when they catch the light, which they're going to do in the same areas where the highlights are. Kind of like the hairs on your arms all point in the same direction, the hairs should point from the base of the sepal towards the tip of the sepal, more or less.
Yeah, we are looking pretty good. So all my last little motion is just going to go back in and check in lines that I would like to accentuate a little bit more. Already been doing. So yeah. Alright, we call that.
Oh, brush cleanup time. Because we are reusing these brushes, please ensure that your brushes are well cared for. You might be getting them back later if you choose to do this again. Rinse them really well in water. I'm bringing my brush all the way down and almost scrubbing it on the bottom of my container, same as if I were really trying to get some paint on my palette. Scrubbing it out really well. Getting the paint out of them, squeezing the dirty water out of my bristles, reshaping the bristles so that they dry together. Do that with both of my brushes. If you want to take it the extra mile, and please do this, especially if the water in your mug is very, very dirty, do this with clean water as well before the paint has a chance to dry in the bristles. All right, and that's that.
Alright, so that is the conclusion of our Golden Banner tutorial video. By behalf of me, Justin Ringlein, and Alina Nuebel, thank you for watching and being a part of these projects as we go through. And I just want to remind you to be patient with yourselves when you're working on this and absolutely have fun with them. And again, these are samples of the different range of these flowers and how they get put together for a finished result on a wall to become a mural. So thank you very much and enjoy yourselves.